day to be alive in Central Virginia. A lot we're going to cover, folks, with Nakaya Walker. She's been so kind to give us a part of her day on the show. We will get to her in a matter of moments. Certainly a leader in our community with a lot of topics we'd like to cover with Mayor Walker. Before we get to Mayor Walker, and she's coming up in a matter of moments, let's thank Greenberry's Coffee. Did you guys know that Sean and Roxanne Simmons, the husband and wife team behind Greenberry's Coffee, started with a beat-up Honda Civic out of the McIntyre Office Park? They deliver their coffee all over town. Today, 27 years later, they have 30 locations worldwide. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Japan. They're opening in Portland. And folks, it all started right here in Charlottesville. These are the kind of stories we talk about on I Love Seville. The second folk that we want to give some props to here on the show, Scott Wagner of Scott Wagner Chiropractic and Sports Medicine. Dr. Wagner is changing people's lives. I have seen it firsthand at Scott Wagner Chiropractic and Sports Medicine. On that note, let's go to the two-shot. Let's welcome Mayor Walker to the show. Mayor Walker, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. First, we'll start with you. Who is Mayor Walker? What are your hobbies? What are your interests? So much is about the politics. Yeah. So much is about the news. Who are you as a person?
Native of the community. Family is from the area or the surrounding counties. I, have 3 children I've raised in the area. So that has definitely, led to an advantage in my current position. And, really excited about being a part of where we are in this moment in Charlottesville.
I have a 9-month-old. I feel like I'm going through the thick, he is not sleeping. He has the mom detachments. How do you do all you do with 3 kids? Because I'm struggling to do it just with one.
Oh, I've been doing it for forever, right? So that's it. It's not a
do what you got to do.
You just do it.
Yeah, I love it.
You just get it done.
Let's talk about the news cycle. Let's talk about what's going on here. You had a meeting yesterday.
We did have a meeting.
How
yesterday.
did it go?
It went as normal. No, we got out pretty early. It was 9:30. When the meeting ended, there was a little, contingent about CRB, and but for the majority of the meeting, it went pretty smooth.
The attrition on the police force, maybe that's a good springboard. Start open-ended with you, Mayor Walker. Your thoughts on what's going on here? I mean, our chief said maybe it's tied to pay, maybe it's tied to not having the take-home cars, maybe it's tied to folks in the community not holding our police officers with the respect that they deserve. Your thoughts on what's going on?
So definitely the pay in every area in the city. We have an issue where people can't live in the community that they serve. So we know that's something that we need to work on, and the police chief has brought that to our attention that the police officers haven't been paid, even what other public safety personnel has been paid. So we'll be reviewing that during the budget cycle. I think that some of the officers, if the reason why we hired this particular chief is not only that she was a veteran police officer, right? Because there are tons of police officers in this country, but if you're talking about a shift happening in policing where you can get in a room and you can talk about being as just and as fair as possible in a space where you will have to lock people up and charge them with crimes, she is the right person for that. And there may be some officers who may not be able to get behind that, like transformative policing.
Right? I think she's the right choice without question.
I think she's an amazing choice.
Right.
And so some people may leave just because, the vision that she has for the police department, they don't fit into that vision. If you know about branding, if you're trying to rebrand, change the culture of something, then there are some people that it won't work for. And so that part can be, part of the issue. In terms of community members being angry, they are angry. And it is disappointing that she is on the receiving end of that anger and frustration. But at the same time, we sign up for this Do they owe them an apology? I don't think so, because that anger and frustration is coming from years and years of, police abuse, mistrust that is built in the community. So it is our job to undo that, and so that there's more trust in the community for the government as a whole.
Well said. Well said. And I think, Sheriff Chip Harding, I'm going to disagree vehemently with his comments on CBS 19. And he made the comment that we need an independent third party to potentially audit the department and figure out what's going on. I think that's hogwash. I think it's ridiculous for somebody that's so new to the job to have somebody else asking for an independent third party to come in. I don't think that's fair to the police chief. I don't think that's indicative of what's going on. But then again, you're the mayor. I'm just a guy with a microphone here.
But without having a conversation with her, if you're talking about professionals in Charlottesville and someone who served on our police force in the past, you're just a few steps away. You could have had a conversation. You could have reached out and said, these are some of the things that I'm hearing. How can I be of assistance to you? If that's how they truly felt, as if things were a partnership. And so that's the problem. I mean, it was completely disrespectful.
It was disrespectful because it felt like it was like almost backstabbing, like going around someone's back as opposed to going face to face.
But again, I posted on Facebook, he would have never done that to Longo and had several conversations back and forth. Oh, absolutely. It didn't happen. Right. And there were moments to critique Longo too. It did not happen. So then you're looking at this conversation that people think is very uncomfortable to have in this town. But why is it comfortable for a white male to go seek out media attention to talk about a black female professional?
You think that's what it is?
I do. Yeah. And I've been very vocal about it.
And do we think that's why the attrition's happening in the department? Because it's an African-American female leader?
For some. I mean, I know there are people who wish they didn't have to talk to me, who don't feel that I am the person that they should have to answer, questions from, or that they should have to take advice seriously from.
How do you handle that? How can you tell they feel that way?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. There's so many ways. But I mean, there are some staff members who they will cut a corner before they speak to me. I mean, it's pretty clear. I mean, energy, you can read the energy in a room unless you are, completely
oblivious.
People get it. So, but the point is you just keep doing your work.
Do you think, what do we do to solve the police force? It concerns me. Why it concerns me is a good police force is going to maintain security and safety in the community. Why it concerns me is the citizens need to trust our police force. Why it concerns me is Albemarle County, Louisa County, Orange County, if they're offering more money and take-home vehicles, and these officers are living in these communities already, we are asking a lot from them to drive from a county to the city to work at a job that might be lower pay. Your thoughts on all this?
So, I mean, one, if you look at those areas, they're not very progressive areas. I mean, we're still, struggling sometimes with the conversation with our very close neighbor in any direction, the county, right, in terms of being progressive about some of the major issues regarding race and class that we're having in this community. So if the officers feel more comfortable in those communities, they are probably communities where they should be. And hopefully we'll be able to attract people that are comfortable with the growth and the vision that the police chief is hopefully working on within, our police department.
You bring up Albemarle County, and I'm curious if and I asked this to your colleague, Heather Hill, yesterday. What's the dynamic like? And the reason I asked this is because I love the efforts you guys made to keep the courts downtown. It's a no-brainer to me. Moving the courts to the county was not going to drive economic growth to the county. People don't go to courts to eat steak dinners, go on shopping sprees, and have martinis. They go to the court, they see the judge, and they leave. So hopefully, right. Keeping it downtown was without question. Where I'm going with this is Supervisor Randolph said he was uncertain that the city was going to live up to its word from a parking standpoint. I didn't like that comment from Supervisor Randolph. Your thoughts on all this with the city-county relations?
Yeah, the city, they haven't been the most positive relationship. I mean, the only thing you can do is just, be true to your word. If there is an issue with building the parking garages, we will have that conversation, and hopefully, the attorneys and our new city manager and Jeff Richard, they will have the conversations that are necessary to have. But I think it's, what has, been done in the past. They haven't had very positive encounters, from what I've heard about previous meetings. They couldn't even get out of a meeting, much less with a solution, but, with just, positive, attitudes before. And so I don't think that we are currently, at least I'm not having that problem. There are supervisors who I haven't, had a one-on-one with yet.
Which is shocking, right? You're
I'm
the
not
mayor
shocked.
of Charlottesville. You're not shocked?
Yeah, I'm not
I'm
shocked.
shocked.
Yeah, but at the same, and it's been very busy.
Right. You're always busy.
So I'm not necessarily saying for everyone that it's them, but, I think that when we've been in the room, that I think it's working.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I look at the county and the city almost as one. I feel like Charlottesville is stronger when the county is stronger, and county is stronger when Charlottesville's stronger.
Well, that's any region, right? You can go, I'm thinking of Old Lynchburg Road right now, and you can be at one address and you're in the city, your next door neighbor can be,
That's my stomping ground.
In the county. And so it's that simple, right? And so we need, I think when I talked earlier about being progressive, right, the county will not be able to avoid the conversations that we are having in the city because they are so close, right? And overall, we are a very close, community. We can't separate from each other. So if we're not doing well, they're not going to be doing well. When you're talking about individuals not being able to afford housing and, whether they move to the county or are pushed out of the city, the county is the next step that they look in. Then a county bordering,
Louisa, Orange,
then
Green.
bordering that.
Yeah.
And so we all have to look at things from, this regional perspective, which is hard.
I totally agree. Another a
very
microcosm
difficult.
of what you're saying is the Willoughby neighborhood.
Yeah.
Half in the city, half in the
Yes.
county. And from the county standpoint, when city is doing well, county's going to do better. One of the things that I was really worried about with this is, and you mentioned the affordable housing, and I look at Charlottesville as being so landlocked. I look at Charlottesville as having, 53% of its property is it zoned on R1 for single family? I mean, that right there needs to change.
Well, the Planning Commission is looking at that.
Having an R1 zoning is going to limit what we can do from an affordable housing standpoint. Is that the first step, do you think?
It may be one of, a collection of steps that we need to take, but you also have to make sure that developers don't abuse any zoning changes that you put in place, which is
developers and abusing go hand in hand.
Very possible.
Right.
Yeah, so the R1 zoning definitely when you're talking about there's limited space to build things on, definitely something that you have to look at, but there also have to be provisions in place to make sure that people are being served that you want served.
Councilor Hill called it a affordable housing crisis. We at that point?
Oh, we've been at that. We're past that point.
Yeah. So one of the things that I appreciate about you, many things, but one of the things I appreciate about you is the transparency piece. That was your platform.
Yeah.
Being honest, straightforward. And one of the things I also appreciate about you is the Facebook Lives. I mean, you're real. From the affordable housing piece here, we've been talking about it for so long. I feel like it's crescendoed a lot because of the aftermath of A12. I feel like it's more on our mouths, more in the news cycle. I'm trying to find a solution. I try to emphasize it on the show here. We have folks from, say, the Fifeville, Cherry Avenue, Prospect neighborhoods. They're concerned. I asked, April Ward, who grew up in Fifeville, and she's trying to be a Fifeville specialist. Are you concerned that Charlottesville or that Fifeville could be swallowed by UVA? She says, absolutely. Where I'm going with this is, what are the steps you see to solving this problem?
Well, one, we have to make a commitment at the city level that affordable housing is a priority, right? And so then those zoning modifications that we put in place, we need to make sure that they will include affordable housing and won't give developers wiggle room to get out of building. Like even now using the SUP, we know that hasn't
special
worked
use
in
permit.
Special use permits,
Yeah.
that hasn't worked in the past. It's not currently working for the city. It hasn't worked in the past, and it's displaced, a lot of families. So, I mean, that's part of it.
One of the things that concerns me with developers is they're able, if they choose, to allocate money to a fund.
A very small percentage of funding to the affordable housing fund.
Right, to keep affordable housing on their project. So basically, from my standpoint, and I have a very layman's perspective, you have the expert's perspective. From my perspective, a developer that's allocating money to a fund so he or she do not have to build affordable housing in that development, that's pretty much reinforcing the class system that's troublesome in this community.
Yes, and it's been allowed, and it's been okay for a lot of people to, participate in the displacement of Native families and families who don't have a lot of income. And that should be unacceptable. Right. And when you attempt to have that conversation, you're often asked, why is this about race? Why is this about class?
And then the next step is often you are trying to stifle entrepreneurialism or economic growth.
Yeah.
When the reality is that's not what's happening.
No, because it has only benefited a certain group of people in the community. So if you're white and wealthy, right, that's primarily who benefits from what's going on in this community. And that is not, hopefully, the community that any of us should want to live in.
Right. A diverse community is what we want.
Which, if we don't have these very difficult conversations 10 to 20 years from now, we won't have to have them because people will have been permanently displaced.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. And I feel like the R1 zoning, in fact, it's a fact. The R1 zoning was put into place decades ago to prevent white flight from the city. A lot of folks were going to the county for the bigger plots of land, the bigger homes, the McMansions. And the city said, let's change this to R1. Let's keep this so people can want to stay in the city here. Help me out here. Educate us.
About the...
Yeah, I mean, I see it like if Charlottesville's made its bed. We got to this point because of folks in leadership decades ago that have put us in this position.
But you also have to look at the current zoning, not just the current zoning practice, but who owns the available land and what they decide to do with it. So changing the zoning, what they can do by right, like these are all conversations that we've had. The West 2nd Street project was one of the times this past year that we had those conversations where there wasn't a commitment to on-site affordable housing, not just a lack of commitment. It was as if people didn't even deserve to live in the downtown area.
Is that Keith Woodard's project?
Keith Woodard's project, if they couldn't afford the property, right? And so then there's backlash about us not being a council that favors developers building entrepreneurship versus a conversation about someone who has been building in this community for years, wanting to continue to build the way they had been building. So we're talking about diversity. Why can't you include affordable homes in your project that is on city-owned property, that the whole entire conversation started because the city market needed a permanent home, but you turned it from a market plaza, centered
to penthouse condominiums.
To something that suits you and your needs. And that should be unacceptable for us.
That was one of the questions I was going to ask you. I appreciate you leading us there. I mean, can I play devil's advocate with you?
Sure.
For the sake of the show.
I mean, it's your show.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming.
I'm just a guest.
No, you're a special guest. Here's the devil's advocate side, which you know very well. $80 million project. A lot of jobs, bringing folks that can afford potentially $500, $600, $1 million plus. These are folks that have disposable income that would then potentially spend that disposable income at the merchants downtown. That's the devil's advocate side to that. Your thoughts?
The conversation with Keith Woodard about whether he had the funding to finance his project.
So?
And if you're an entrepreneur and you do not have money to finance your project or you can't get investors, that's not my issue. That's
Touché.
yours.
Well said. Well said. And he walked away, folks, from roughly $1.2 million of his own money that he had put for some underground infrastructure on this project. What is the
But the city had made an investment too.
Right.
Also.
And not only the investment the city made, but the ridiculous opportunity cost of so many people's times getting to this point.
But we also needed to have the conversation when the West 2nd Street project came back to council and the planning commission. It was because he needed approval for additional units to be able to fund the project.
Right, but to his point, and I enjoy this back and forth, to his point, he said in the 2 years, or whatever the time was, where he went to present the plan to when he was trying to start construction, he said the market conditions had changed, cost of goods had gone up, labor had gone up, the market was different. Your thoughts?
Again, if you are trying to expand your business, you need to make sure you have the capital to do that.
I think that's fair, and I think that's right. And if I'm an entrepreneur and I'm at a roadblock, I figure out a way to solve it, and
You
that's
get
what
new
good
investors.
entrepreneurs do.
And I'm pretty sure if investors in this community thought that that was a project that would bring them great return on their investment,
They
would
would
have
be opening their
invested in it.
checkbooks.
And there's a lot of money here.
There is a lot of money
here.
here.
So you have to ask him why other people didn't see this as a great investment.
I've asked Keith to come on the show. Keith, I know you watch it. Keith Woodard, are you going to join us to talk? I mean, come on, Keith. Mayor Walker's kind enough to join us here. Keith, what are you doing here? Let me throw this to you here. What is the future of the city market? Do you worry about that?
I don't think so.
No?
No. I mean, there are...
Is it on Water Street? Is it a move to Ix, Art Park?
I mean, people seem to have enjoyed, having a market at Ix. There's a market at Stonefield. I mean, there are farmers markets.
There's a lot of them
everywhere, right? So I don't think that we need to worry about whether we can find a suitable location in town for people to travel to buy fresh goods and services.
Is it best suited to be downtown?
I think downtown is a good location for it, but we could also look at other locations. And again, I worked at the city market, so again, another insider's view of that. I think it's possible.
I was a big proponent of moving the city market to the Kim's Market location on Cherry Avenue, and I thought it could help revitalize that location and provide really organic, natural food to potentially a neighborhood that needed the opportunity to get organic, natural food. Now, we're going to break some news potentially next week on what's coming to the Kim's Market building. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's not the city market. I wanted to have a whole, Mayor Walker, because I think where it's currently at, and I'm curious of your thoughts, is it's on an asphalt blacktop that's very small and tight. The quality of life, I think, could be better for it.
It could definitely be better. I mean, when you had the conversations about it being moved, people were excited about shelter from the
inclement weather.
Yes, yeah. The sun in the summertime. It's hot out there.
So hot.
Being able to use the restroom without walking, to the mall. Having more space, being able, which wasn't going to work at West 2nd because they had actually reduced the number of potential slots. So, I mean, people were, definitely excited about, indoor plumbing, on a site where they didn't have to walk from. But at the same time, I think we don't just do something, do it right.
Totally agree.
And so hopefully we'll get back to the drawing board with a new city manager about how we can utilize that space. How's it,
you brought us to this question, how's the city manager search going? We have an interim manager now.
We do.
Yeah, he recently, which I gain respect for him, he recently went on record with support for our police chief.
Yes.
And I gained some props for him for that. My question for you is, how is the search for the city manager going?
The search is going. Okay. We had to take a step back. We hired a different executive search firm than we were originally going with. So that took a little bit more time, but our application deadline has been set for January 21st. And so we'll start reviewing the applications with the search firm after that date. And by the end of February, we should be having community panels, staff panels, and making a decision about who that person is going to be.
Why has the search been so arduous or long or complicated? Is this a direct result of A12?
I don't think so. The original search firm that we had wasn't the right search
choice.
firm. It was a search firm that the city had used for several positions for a few years, but it wasn't necessarily the best choice.
Why the attrition with some of our key positions? City manager's one, clerk of council.
Yeah.
Insight. Give us some insight. What's going on? Why the attrition? Is that just normal people leaving jobs?
Some of it, but not all of it. I hope they're happy with where they currently are. I think we needed both of the positions that you mentioned. I think that, getting, new people in with fresh lens is not a bad thing. Yeah.
The police chief, I think, doing a good job. We're still searching for a city manager, clerk of council. Where are we with that?
We should have a clerk on staff by the end of this month.
Get out of town.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Who's that going to be? Can we?
Yeah, no.
No, not yet? But the end of this
Not
month?
at all, yes.
That's awesome. Good for you. I mean,
Yeah.
how active were you guys with picking this person?
Very.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because they report directly to you.
Yeah, it's our direct hire, as is the city manager.
What is the job of the clerk of council from an assisting standpoint?
Oh, my goodness. So we've been drowning since we haven't had one. I mean, Charlottesville is a really intense community. The amount of, walk-in, emails, phone calls, meetings that we have on top of, agenda setting, making sure that we have the right materials for the 1,000,001 things that we do, and just the conversation with, the community members that need to happen before they get to us all the time if they go directly through City Hall. And none of us are in City Hall every day, all day, and so that person is, and knows how to reach us. And I was new, so in my first year we lost our
A lot of positions.
but the clerk is what I'm talking about at this point. And especially Heather and I, we've been doing so many administrative tasks on top of, our regular duties, which are already, a lot. So making phone calls, setting up the interview schedule. I had someone who said, I didn't think the mayor would call me to schedule the interview. You're getting the mayor right now, so I'm looking forward to not having to do that,
The
so that
admin
I
stuff.
can get to
Big picture.
the work that
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be here to do.
Here's a good question for you. What is the role of the mayor? What's the day-to-day activities for the mayor? Can you give us a bird's eye view on your day-to-day?
Well, I work full time also, and so I do that every day, and then council stuff is never ending. So you can wake up to emails and voicemails and go to sleep to emails and voicemails. And a lot of it is, I think, helping. A lot of the way I spend my time is helping people with this cultural shift that I think that we need to have in this town.
Put that in
Whether
perspective.
people are for it or against it. Like Charlottesville is a very... The community has been working for a lot of people, just not everyone. And especially if you're talking about the stats that after the Civil War, Charlottesville was 50% or more African American, right? And you're down to below, a little over 18% at this time. And what does that mean and why? And how do you push someone out of the community and not recognize it? And having those very direct conversations that people have been taught you try to avoid, and even people in my positions, people are used to someone in my position trying to avoid those conversations, and I'm not someone who attempts to avoid them at all. And so that's been a major challenge. But attempting to be creative about how we find solutions to a lot of our issues is primarily how I spend spend my day. And a lot of the administrative stuff at this point that needs to happen to get, people hired and positions filled.
Are you, I mean, I feel like you're working like two really hard full-time jobs here. I mean, the mayor's,
Only one
Yeah.
full-time
Yeah.
job
spot?
that's difficult. Yeah, this one.
We recently, and you guys recently, talked about amending potentially the charter, where counselors could begin to set their own pay. I thought that was a good idea. Why I agreed with a lot of what you're saying with the current pay structure, where it's $18,000 for counselors, $20K for the mayor, is not indicative of the responsibilities, the stress, and the hours of the job.
Not at all.
On top of that, I feel like the pay structure could possibly be limiting the type of candidates that are running for council.
It definitely is.
I'd like to start open-ended with you and give you the platform here. Put this in perspective for us.
Well, if you're talking about a diverse group of people to be able to run and do this job well, they would have to be able to be. A lot of people are not comfortable in very uncomfortable financial situations.
Of course.
Right? And so that's what we need to change. The backlash from the community, from everything from what we didn't deserve to the fact of it just needs to remain the same. And there, of course, were some people supportive of it, but that should be problematic, that you will only cater to retirees or
Wealthy.
people who are wealthy. We've seen the makeup. This is not something that we have to speculate on. You can go back through history and see who has been members of council. And I think it's shifting, that the Democratic Party doesn't have the stronghold that it has had on the party, in terms of nominations in the past.
You're an example.
But I am the best example.
You're the best example, yeah. Maybe the only example, right?
But even with that, it still creates within the party a chance for people who weren't willing to have the conversation, to force different before, they can now do that. And say, no, you can't tell me whether I can run or not. You can't tell me how long I can run. And that's what, happened. People were handpicked, asked, okayed, versus, people really being able to decide for themselves, do I think I can serve and then run? And that was the point that I wanted to make when I decided to run as an independent, that we needed that shift.
How did the Democratic Party, which is the machine here in Charlottesville, we know that, how did they respond to you saying, I'm going to run as an independent?
They ignored me. That was
Really?
it.
They did not even say, change your mind?
Nope.
Really? Because I saw from the beginning, you had momentum.
Yeah.
You had supporters. You had a voice. You had a vision. You had a platform. They never even tried to embrace you.
No.
How did that make you feel?
I don't pay much attention to people. I just do what I do. I knew if you get me in the room with you, you cannot dismiss me. That has been clear my whole life. So I knew that. And I tell the same story whether I'm on Park Street or Rugby or Friendship Court in West Haven. No matter where I'm at, you get the same me. And,
It's refreshing.
That always gets you somewhere. And so I knew that would happen. So that's it. Even people who invited me into their homes hoping that they would be able to say that is why we're not voting, they couldn't.
Why does the Democratic Party have such a stronghold in Charlottesville? And the second part of the question, is it good for Charlottesville that one party pretty much owns the town?
No, I don't think it's good for
I agree.
For the city, and especially they were abusing their power. So all the issues that we talk about that we're having on a federal level, we were having those issues here. I know doing campaign, someone wanted me. Let's talk. Parties happen. Leadership. And
I feel like with an independent like yourself winning, and winning in such newsworthy fashion, such impressive fashion,
Yeah.
I mean, you made an impact. I feel like that could have maybe a generational impact in politics in Charlottesville, because it shows folks, especially with the ubiquitous nature of social media, it shows folks that you perhaps don't have to be aligned with a party to win an election. Your thoughts?
Hopefully that's what will happen. We'll see. I mean, these are one of the things that I would like to wait and see because we don't know. You also, it's pretty expensive to run a campaign in Charlottesville.
Can you put that in perspective for us?
And it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I raised $27,000. I raised the least amount of money, but that was still significant for a city council race. And I think my opponents were in, upper 30s and mid 40s.
So that's something we should put in perspective here.
Yes.
The mayor's position is being paid $20,000 a year, yet it requires someone to raise $27,000 to get this position.
Yes.
That shows right there
That's
that,
insane.
that things are backwards.
Yeah.
Folks say, devil's advocate with you, folks say that when you start amending the city charter, that it could potentially open a Pandora's box that is never ending.
You mean in terms of the pay, the amount?
Right. When city councilors say we want to amend the charter for this, other folks are saying, well, where does it stop? Where does it stop?
Well, our charter needs to be updated. So that's number one. But, I didn't... Looking at the salary request, one of my concerns about it, I am a very fiscally responsible person, and I was concerned about, the abusive nature that future council members would take on what they would allocate to themselves. And that, just throwing out there, tying it to the city manager salary was just, to start the conversation. It wasn't the final, request. But, people have, real challenges with, being open.
And I think folks misconstrued tying it to the city manager as like, oh, we're negotiating his pay to see, we're going to raise his or her pay to make our pay bigger.
No.
You were just doing that as a starting point.
Yes.
And you were doing that as a barometer to show that it's not about us. It's a way for us to kind of set a stepping stone of what pay should be.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. A couple more.
And we would have to make sure, a city manager should be paid in an equitable fashion, but it never should be outrageous. And in my world, you don't do that. I've called every contract that we've signed, and ones that we didn't have control over signing, to question.
A lot of folks think the previous city manager's contract and compensation package, and I think I know where you're going to go with this, was outrageous. His package in totality was probably flirting with $250,000. He had loans forgiven. He had a graduate program paid for. Do you think the city manager of Charlottesville should be between $200,000 and $250,000 when the city councilors are at $20,000 and $18,000?
I do.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And why do you think that?
That's probably reasonable. One, if we want people to have more relaxed occupations here, we're going to have to relax a little bit as constituents, and we don't do that. It's a very difficult place to be and to work, and you're talking about someone who would work nonstop. So I don't think that the salary, if you're doing the work well, was outrageous at all. I think some of the requests and maybe some of the places people wanted to take the salary to have been, outrageous requests. But you want to pay people well for the work that they do. Now, if we're talking about, the increases I read about at the university, then we're not doing that. Right. I think that ballpark range where we've been is pretty, but loan forgiveness,
MBA programs
loans on your homes. And we have tuition assistance in the city, and you want people to be able to grow with you if they work with you, but it has to be reasonable. And people at the top should not be the only people that benefit from it.
That's fair. That's fair.
And so when we're talking about who can live in this community, do we want our city manager living in the community able to afford it, but no other staff member, or only the top lead team staff being able to live in the community? We should want a community where any position that you live in, that you're able to, that you work in, that you're able to live in the city.
Your thoughts on potentially a strong mayor in Charlottesville? Like City of Richmond?
Yeah. If we don't get a great city manager, my position on that may change. We may need to rotate, every few years, who the leader is. If we get, stuck and just having someone on just because they're there. That mentality we shouldn't have. But I think if we set the tone and create an environment where we want people who are productive and creative, innovative, like all of those things, then we won't settle, for someone to just be in the position existing.
Our initial city manager, and you were crushing it today.
Mm-hmm.
You're absolutely crushing it. The initial city manager that was handpicked, it did not work out with him.
Oh, no.
Not a good guy. Not a good guy for the position.
So, that incident was very, challenging, for me, because I felt like I was building a pretty good relationship, especially with Counselor Hill, a working relationship. And it was in having those conversations that I felt, in this case, that the information I was receiving wasn't what I would have expected from her. And that's really where my decision came from. How many people, and under worse circumstances, can someone hand you a name and that person make it to the top
that doesn't
of the list and is selected? And then not only that, that individual did not plan on being here short term. That person was talking about, moving to the area, bringing his wife getting a job here. In his cover letter, he said, as your city manager, it was like permanency in his written
approach.
Words, his verbal language. And that's scary, right? And so we have to make sure that we do this right. So I wasn't going to be on board with getting our old city manager out just to have someone handpicked by individuals in the community who may not be doing the best job serving the entire, community well. And the unfortunate part of that is that name went to Heather, right? And so I had to make the choice of whether I fought for what I thought was the best thing to do, or trusted someone who I did trust, but that relationship was just beginning. And so that was the
reason you did the Facebook Live.
That's the decision that I made.
In retrospect, do you handle it differently, or you feel
No.
you handled it well?
Because he would be here.
Well said. There you go.
He would be here, and I just don't think he was the best person for the job. If we are going to make decisions like that, if we are just going to bring people in that is not going to figure out how to serve everyone in the community, then we could have, stayed with the former city manager.
Do we think that situation is impacting the hiring process now?
It may be, but we've had some great,
candidates
for other positions. City attorney, the police chief, the clerk. I don't think so, but we'll see.
We will see.
We don't know who they are yet.
Time will tell. Mayor Walker, a lot of questions coming in here for you. One of the questions that's come in via Twitter, it's a question that I'm also intrigued about, is Dr. Bellamy, your colleague, has aspirations of potentially renaming or rebranding Preston Avenue. Mm-hmm. Open-ended question.
We talked about that a little bit last night. So, and it's the same foundation that the conversation around the statues were centered around. Who had the power to get something named after themselves, right? Who has the resources? Who in that time and space in the community can have other people acknowledge them? And we know that based on history, who people are. This isn't just a conversation that Wes continues to bring up. Mm-hmm. The university in their panels, the President Commission in the Age of Slavery, mm-hmm. One of the first set of things that started coming up were the building names, the dorm rooms. Who are these building named after? If you have a building named after someone who was a part of the eugenics movement, do we continue to have that building named after them? And so that's a question that was even asked on, campus. So I think don't want to speak for Dr. Bellamy, but I think what he's saying is that there is energy surrounding names and spaces, and the power behind the people that we are acknowledging. That's what he's saying. So the statue for some people is just a statue, and then the statue to other people is just a reminder of living in a world that doesn't see you, that doesn't value you.
Now, to play devil's advocate with you here, and this is something I hear about constantly. It's coming through Twitter and through Facebook as we speak. Now, if you rebrand Preston Avenue and you change the name of Preston Avenue because Mr. Preston, let's use Mr. Preston, had a history of slave
enslaving
ownership. Yeah, enslaving people.
Yes.
Yeah, nasty stuff. Where does it stop?
It probably doesn't.
Well, where I'm going with this is Thomas Jefferson.
It's the same conversation.
Right.
UVA
Do we eradicate Thomas Jefferson from UVA?
That's a conversation where what does the shift look like? So years ago, my friend talks about being in a meeting where the conversation around Thomas Jefferson was talking about, the pears that they used to have on the table and the beautiful pottery that they used to sit in. Is that the conversation that you have? Or do you have an authentic conversation about the fact that, this person enslaved people, that the legacy that you're talking about was built on the backs of other people, and that those people get absolutely no recognition at all? And the recognition isn't just, oh, I'm sorry, I enslaved you, but the fact that generations after them, for a lot of people, live in a level of poverty that, is not reflective of Monticello and all the things that we attribute positively to Thomas Jefferson because they were enslaved and they didn't matter. And so that's the conversation. So is it merely enough just to say, oh, I'm sorry, right? Or what does true reparations look like? And that is a conversation that this country has been very uncomfortable having, and this city is very uncomfortable
I have to ask you, then what are the reparations? What needs to be done to say the community that was displaced at Vinegar Hill? We took homes away, we took businesses away, the most valuable assets in people's portfolios, the assets that create generational wealth, removed. How do we solve that?
So let me ask you a question.
Sure.
So if you, if someone could prove that you built your business off of their ideas and their work, and they took you to court today, what would happen?
I think what would happen is it would come down to a court to determine what happened. A good example of that is Wegmans, the grocery store on 5th Street. Was selling T-shirts with the I Love Seville trademark without my permission. And I have the United States Patent and Trademark Office in my corner. And Wegmans, they didn't even know they were making this mistake. The T-shirt provider, Gildan T-shirts, gave them a batch of T-shirts to sell. And they sold them for 14 days. Long story short, Wegmans ended up striking us a 6-figure check for the mistake they made. And the reason that was the case is because the United States Patent and Trademark Office said, you're violating Jerry's trademark, and it's the entire identity of my company.
So, right, you take that and you're talking about centuries where individuals were never paid or acknowledged for what they do. So you're enslaved on a plantation and you have a trade. Who gets credit for your trade?
Probably the owner of the plantation.
Not probably.
Yeah, definitely the owner of the plantation. So
owner of the plantation gets to benefit from your trade. They get to take care of their family based on your trade.
And their generations afterwards.
And what do you get?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Now,
you do get something. You get the Civil War, you get what's supposed to be emancipation, and then you get modern day enslavement. But you don't get anything beneficial for you and your family. It's a very hard discussion for people to have.
Yeah.
And people get angry when you start. But what you just said, you got a 6-figure check from 14 days. You're talking about people who were enslaved for centuries, never any acknowledgement.
So it sounds like, and I don't want to read between the lines, we're both straight shooters.
Oh, no, I'll tell you.
It sounds like you think Thomas Jefferson should be removed from UVA.
So, again, I I'm not a history major. I don't know.
He owned slaves. He had a relationship with us. He had a relationship.
No, he definitely, it is up to, I think I'm on a university commission, president's commission in the age of segregation, right? I'm not going to waste my time to answer the question as if we are ever going to get to a point in my lifetime where someone would be removing Thomas Jefferson from anything. I mean, it's likely that we will change Preston Avenue. It's likely that we can get Lee statue at some point removed. Do I think that people would probably not start another civil war if we start talking about what happens to TJ for people who respect him?
I mean, I think all hell would break loose.
It probably would. Now, am I the type of person that would say, if that's where we are, but is that even worth spending your time on? That is not going to come from any of the president's commissions. It's not going to come from the state level at any point. I mean, it's just a waste of time. So changing,
how about from a personal standpoint?
But changing Preston Avenue is not going to lead to Thomas Jefferson being removed from anywhere.
How about from a personal standpoint?
What?
Thomas Jefferson and UVA.
Thomas Jefferson doesn't matter to me. He just doesn't.
It's an interesting...
I mean, for me, when I hear Thomas Jefferson, I hear slave owner, someone who enslaved individuals and was able to do their work and build their legacy off the backs of other people. So he's not someone that we're going to discuss in my house as someone who you pay any acknowledgement or respect to. That it's not happening. So it's not a way that I spend my time. But I am also very aware that we're not going to get to a point where UVA is not going to acknowledge Thomas Jefferson, that his name will be removed from anything at the university. And since we're talking about a state-owned institution, that we'll get to that point at anywhere in the state of Virginia where the governor will ever sign an order that says that.
I appreciate that answer. That was straightforward. I have somebody on Facebook that is asking about the advertising campaign to rebrand Charlottesville.
What was it?
It was civilization.
Civilization.
And then there was some crazy tagline of some people choose to spit a certain way or something weird like that. Yeah. And we need to put it in perspective. I'll set the background and then get your take. An advertising agency from Raleigh, North Carolina called Clean put a campaign together for the CACVB, which is led by interim director Adam Healy, formerly of Borrowed and Blue. This campaign I thought was horrendous. I thought this campaign showcased a certain demographic. I'm going to cut to the chase. The demographic this campaign showcased was white people that were young, that looked preppy and affluent, and it was not inclusive or an indication of where we want this community to go. And I think you as a leader who is unafraid to speak her mind, you brought that to attention on your Facebook page. It shows the power of social media. Yes. And after you brought that to attention, article in the newspaper, talking about it on this show, it's a conversation
starter. I think it was in the newspaper before I posted it.
But you really brought it to the news cycle here. Let's start open-ended. The campaign in itself, the first things that came to your mind when you saw it.
Business as usual.
Really? You're just like, this is Charlottesville?
Yes, this is Charlottesville.
And then second
thing.
So,
and that's why, who do you blame? Do you blame this board
system?
And the leader, the current leader, or do you acknowledge that that's where we are in this town and really have conversations about how do we move away from that?
And where is the blame?
That wasn't the first time. Susan Payne did the same thing after August 12th, 2017. I mean, the same thing happened. With that attempt to rebrand. And it's what people are very comfortable with.
I mean, I just don't even think, it shocks me how we even got to that point. So soon after 8/12, we're putting campaigns together that feature nothing but 20 and 30-year-old white people drinking wine.
But it's what sells.
Yeah, and that's what Adam Healy said today in the Seville Weekly. He said we have to determine whether the campaign is about equality or is the campaign about driving revenue to the community?
Yeah. And so when I am asked, Nakaya, are you concerned about everyone? Nakaya, are you concerned about, businesses suffering? Why would I focus my attention on that if you can ask those questions? because no one in this town who's doing any work should be asking that question. It should be both, with no exceptions, but it hasn't been both, and people don't want to make it, about equality and business, right? Equity and business, social justice and business. There is a way to not mistreat people, to not try to push people into your backdrop. And in that ad campaign, you weren't even in the backdrop, right? Maybe you were down on the field, picking the grapes still for the next bottle of wine. I don't know where the hell you were, but it's an issue.
What can be, here's a concern I have. The CACVV has a huge board, so many people involved. And you know better than anyone, when you start getting a lot of people on a board, everyone has to talk, everyone has an opinion, everyone has a direction, everyone says we should be going this way, and it prevents progress from happening.
Well, I think there are two things there. It's not necessarily the number of individuals on the board, but it's individuals who are not on the same team, right? Who don't have the same vision.
So you're saying county and city?
Not even just county and city. There are some members on the. I mean, clearly somebody thought that was okay.
Well, I think it was Adam. I think it was Adam.
Yeah, but if you're on my board, you don't present that to me.
Because you know better.
Ever, right? And so
he did get backlash. From the board members. I thought it was fair backlash, but keep going. I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, but I think that's an issue when we have to have this conversation about what does moving forward look like. And right now, the county isn't in the same place that we are in terms of talking about the changes. I hope they'll get there. They just hired a great individual to work on equity in the county, Ms. Russell, and I think maybe that we'll meet, in the same place. But I think that's a challenge. And when your only focus is not necessarily to acknowledge what occurred, but to acknowledge how quickly you want to move away from people thinking that when they think of Charlottesville, which is not going to happen. So Charlottesville had, decades and decades of people thinking like we were perfect.
Happiest city in America.
If you went outside of here and you told people that you were from Charlottesville, if they did not get it mixed up with Charlotte,
right,
it was only favorable things about it. And so that was one of the issues that people had, is not only did this summer of hate happen, but outside of that, people who are not tied to here, who they don't have to sell a narrative that works for the individuals in this community, to start saying, so let's look a little bit deeper. So things that, individuals in power here had attempted to cover up, there are people outside of here, like the ProPublica article, that they are not trying to cover. They're not trying to cover it up. So it puts us in a position where we either do it right, or people will continuously be interested, and they will write at some point how we're not doing it right. And we won't be able to pretend anymore.
The flip side of the coin is, and I don't want to speak for Adam Healy, but I do know marketing and advertising. And he was quoted today in the Seaville Weekly saying, is it about social justice or is it about driving economic growth to the community? And he says if it's about driving economic growth to the community...
So only white people can do that?
Well, no, that's not where I was going. So this is where...
I'm just asking. Yeah. I'm asking him.
Well,
Adam, email me and let me know.
Yeah, I think what he's doing, and I don't want to assume here, but I think what he's doing is if you go to the vineyards and the wineries, and you just do an eye test, you see predominantly white folks.
But why?
Yeah, I don't know. Why?
So you're talking about living in a town where people don't feel like a part of the community. People who used to be the majority, right, of the community. That's an issue. And that's the same conversation when people, why didn't you vote on the $75,000 for the downtown mall? The same conversation. You go downtown, you do that eye test, as you say. Who do you see?
I see white folks in their 20s and 30s.
And then we're talking about a diverse community. everyone has the answers when you start talking about equity and diversity. They are saying we're on board for it. We're here. We want to assist. But it's messing with my money, right? White people who are on a page looking vibrant, they're the ones who sell. What does that mean? You're having the same conversation about there are a group of people who apparently don't, right? Who have been pushed. And that when you have that conversation in that segment, that's the same conversation you're having with increase in, prison numbers, local jail numbers, social services, school system and miseducation. There is a group of people that in your world, because they do not bring the capital along with them, that they're disposable. Not just forgotten.
Disposable. It's a better word right there. So it's almost like a chicken and an egg situation. Like what comes first? I think the campaign should be extremely diverse. So when folks that are Latin, folks that are African American, they see the campaign in D.C., they see the campaign in Raleigh in the Triangle, they feel included and they feel welcome to Charlottesville and want to come and patronize.
But we can't just have it on a poster board and then when you come to the
it's
actual
not really
site,
reality.
It's not reality. So that's more about the work that we have to do.
Yeah.
Versus,
this is so hard.
It is difficult.
Yeah. So is there a clear-cut solution?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that what most people in power think the solution is not. If people feel welcome where they are in their community, they will show up. They will participate. I was telling about the downtown mall. My family lived, 4 or 5 blocks from the mall. It was never, let's go walk down the mall and get some ice cream. I think probably the first time I walked to the mall to get ice cream was when I worked at the group home, and it was part of our daily, our daily plans to walk the kids down to the mall to get ice cream from Chaps. Chaps had been there when I was younger. And so you can live just a few blocks over and you don't feel like you're part of the community. And
I totally see that in so many aspects of Charlottesville. As someone who went to UVA, there was the UVA bubble. As someone who then went from UVA to trying to be a professional, then there was the downtown mall where we didn't go to the UVA bubble because they were students. And now we're the downtown mall. You see so many different pockets and bubbles around the community. And it's frustrating.
It is.
And, what I'm trying to do with this show is to have the conversations. I'm trying to showcase folks, leaders, people with different mindsets, different visions, and to have the conversation and get the dialogue going. One of the folks here, Andre Xavier, who's from the tourism category, he suggests cutting the clean contract, the advertising agency from Raleigh, terminating them. And his suggestion is to do a crowdsource campaign where we use a fraction of the money that we were playing clean.
To see what the community will come up with.
Create a prize. And then have all our intelligent and creative people in the area create a campaign for Charlottesville. Your thoughts?
That could work.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Do you feel like it could be more indicative of what Charlottesville's about?
Maybe. It depends on who participates, because I think we could run into potentially the same where some people just don't feel like, I tried to get a good example of this, some of the individuals that I know well to participate in the Flicker to Flame. They just did that contest. It's just like, they're not going to pick me. Why do,
And they just didn't even try?
Didn't even try. So it's part of this is that it has happened so long, but I think if we keep putting it out there.
Emphasizing that anyone can win.
That at some point, not just win, but that we welcome your participation, that you're not going to be pushed to the sideline, that we will listen to your tape if you take the time out to make it. So we will value your artwork if you take the time to create an ad campaign or, whatever. And so just so many people just feel left out. So I think that's what we have to undo. And that takes effort. And people are not really seeing that's happening.
You're doing a great job here. I got a handful more questions here. A lot of questions are coming in. You're killing it. I know. You're crushing. We've already had like 50 minutes here.
Oh,
it's so easy with you. You're very good at your job. Let me throw this to you here. Comprehensive plan. Do you think it's going to promote affordable housing?
I think that we have the right people at the table, for the most part, to come up with a plan for the times that we're in.
What do we see as the future for a very important neighborhood, Friendship Court? Because Habitat's coming in, right?
I don't know anything about Habitat.
Oh, excuse me. The Piedmont Housing. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry. That was my mistake.
Piedmont Housing
Yes.
Alliance. I'm like,
Right.
did I miss something?
No, that was
That's
my
very
mistake.
possible.
That was my mistake.
So, I have some major issues with, Friendship Court. When this conversation first started happening, I think it was in 2015, about that those buildings had reached their lifespan, basically, which is not the case. You know how long buildings can last, and those buildings are not at the end of theirs. What the real conversation is that you're talking about buildings on prime real estate that now other people would like to live in. And it's about how do we redevelop this so that we can maximize the potential of this space. So part of it is just about being honest.
I think that totally is what it is. There's a huge block of land that's, a quarter of a mile, not even a quarter of a mile from the downtown mall, that is extremely valuable.
Yes.
And important, wealthy people in this community are licking their chops of what they could do with it.
Yes.
I think that's what it is.
And that you have major developments all around it, right? And those individuals have enough power to influence what happens at Friendship Court. So that's the honest. But even if there's some redevelopment that happens, we're under a new executive director, but the old executive director totally disregarded the families that currently live there. We're doing you a favor if we even figure out a way to let you stay, type of attitude. And Sunshine inherited that type of organization. Now, I think he's a much better person, but I'm also not foolish enough to believe that the individuals that also have his ear, have the power in this community, might not think the same way as the former executive director. So that could be problematic. I don't think that we have the social makeup that we need in this city for families who currently live there to survive, being mixed with market rate.
What do you mean by
families? That? So if someone lives differently than you live, and we know everyone has issues, everyone has problems, but we know that it's responded to differently based on who you are. So if families do what families do, have a normal disagreement, if someone running a market rate think that they shouldn't have that type of disagreement the way they're having it, and they call the police or they call social services or whatever, what is going to happen to the families once the police or social services show up, right? And so if families are displaced because they do not fit the social constructs that they would like to have on that land once they open it up to market rate units, they'll be pushed out. Not only will they be pushed out, you can't just say leave. You have to create conditions that they don't survive under, which is what has happened primarily throughout history. So that's an issue. Can someone whose average income is $14,000 survive in a community like Charlottesville, living next door to someone who can afford market rate units?
I would say probably not. I'd say probably not.
Yeah, and so that's where we are, and so it's not enough just to redevelop the land and make sure that lower income families, workforce families can live there, and figure out how to pay for that. We want to include this market rate, which is better than it was under the previous executive director. It's a third subsidized, a third affordable, which needs to be defined, and a third market rate. But I think that market rate, and depending on their definition of affordable, whether it's 80%, whether it's, and how much past 100% they are willing to go. I would cap it at 60%. no one would be above 60% of our area's AMI who lived in the community, and we need to figure out how to pay for that.
One of the I think the most powerful person in the city of Charlottesville is probably Corin Capshaw. This gentleman has his hands in more things than I think people even realize. We both know that. He has some very big aspirations for Crescent Halls. He seems to be the major development player in Charlottesville with Riverbend Development. I want to start open-ended first with you.
Okay.
Riverbend Development, Corin Capshaw. Your thoughts?
Well, I can speak to right now what's before me is Riverbend Development, Corin Capshaw, and public housing redevelopment.
Okay.
Because that's where.
Sure. And that's in the news.
Yeah. That's where we are. What we are hearing him say is that his intention is to help redevelop our housing sites because of their current conditions, and just that cut and dry.
Do we think he's genuine? Is there an ulterior motive?
I need to see people in action. So I'm just gonna, leave it at that.
So you're saying you'll believe it when you see it?
I just hope he is. There's nothing that I've heard from him that makes me think that he isn't, but we'll see. I will be watching very closely.
And is the first test Crescent Halls?
For Crescent Halls, a site on First Street, and I think those are the first two.
Because what I see, just from the layman's perspective, I see the most powerful man in the city on the top floor of his building, looking out his window, looking at Crescent Halls.
No, that's definitely.
Sees it every day. And he probably sees the ridiculous potential of this building.
Yes. And so you ask those questions.
They're fair, right?
Like, what do you get out of this deal?
I feel like we're being fair asking these questions.
Yeah, and I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll see. Luckily, the public housing has protection that Friendship Court doesn't, right? So if PHA and National Housing Trust that owns Friendship Court decided they did not want to submit an application to renew subsidized housing, they could have done that. The public housing units, it's under HUD. It's some different set, of rules for public housing. The residents have a Bill of Rights. It would take a lot more, to take those properties. It's possible. But it would take a lot more to take those properties. And that's one of my major concerns. I mean, who wouldn't want where Crescent Halls?
I mean, you could walk everywhere.
Right?
Yeah.
And who wouldn't want to offer, those, CRHA, the ability to maybe build something great on another plot of land and move individuals too. But I think that the staff and board and council members have had those conversations, and that, public housing residents will be the families occupying that land and the space, and it's only right. Because again, there were initial conversations about, not just Riverbend, but, people who wanted that land. Corin Capshaw isn't the only one who's looking out, at it. X Park owner, same thing.
Ludwig and Allen. Yeah.
Who is, probably, waiting for me to maybe get run over by something.
You think Alan Kajin is? Really? Kajin is something, ain't he?
So, but I mean, that's where we are. We just need to have, we need to make sure that people are taken care of and protected.
You think Corin's coming from a good place?
He said he is. I can only go by what he says until he shows me something different. But along the way, it's not blind trust, right? I don't do that.
You hold them accountable.
So not only that, what's in writing? What does the paperwork that we're signing look like? And so to make sure that the attorneys reviewing the paperwork on behalf of the people can match the expertise and knowledge, base that Corin Capshaw's attorneys
sure, because that guy's got deep pockets.
So it's just making sure that people are taken care of,
dotting the I's and crossing the T's.
First and foremost,
right?
And it's not about whether I believe you or not. It's just this is how business is done, and don't do business any differently when you're dealing with the most vulnerable families than you would do for your own business.
Well said right there. That was very well said. One of the things that I admire about you is your courage and your fearlessness. We first saw your fearlessness and courage on display when you chose to run for council as an independent and go away from the Democratic Party. That took guts.
I didn't go away from them.
Well,
I was
no.
never invited.
Never invited, right. But that took guts.
Never invited to the table with them.
Here's where I'm going with this is another aspect where I saw your courage and your fearlessness was with your vote with the $500,000 in the New Hill Development Corporation. It's a neighborhood in Star Hill that is a predominantly African American community. And here we have a group that wanted to allocate, was looking for money to help potentially revitalize the community. Let's start open-ended here. Why did you feel, why did you vote against the $500,000?
I didn't have enough information.
Okay.
That's it. I mean, enough information about the direction and about, the work that they really, that they would do and the track record. And one thing I am is consistent. I'm going to ask everybody the same questions. So the same questions that I was asking Keith Woodard, I asked, New Hill. I do hope that they're aligned with their mission, and it could be great. I mean, we need to have Black people in those type of positions, potentially, making, at the table when we are discussing how to move forward and how to make this community, more equitable. So, I hope that, Quentin and Yolanda can do that. And I said to them that I look forward to supporting you in the future. But just at that time, I just needed a little bit more information.
And Mrs. Harrell, if you're watching, and I know you tune into the show, we have invited you on the program to talk about your plans for the Star Hill neighborhood. The invitation is open anytime you want. Yolanda, please join us here on the I Love Seville show. I gain respect for you because I also would have voted the same way. $500,000 is a lot of money. And initially there was no plan in place for the allocation and distribution of those funds.
Well, I think they had a plan. I just don't think that everybody was aware of what the plan was.
How much flack did you catch for not voting in favor of this?
A lot.
Did you? Yeah, I bet you did.
But I get it all the time.
Yeah.
So, but again, one thing that we have to look at, in terms of the money, I have seen so many things at City Hall where that type of money has, been
allocated.
Wasted. Yeah. So I want them to be successful.
Me too.
I want to help them, even if we compare that to, the SIA. The SIA has,
strategic investment area.
Yeah. They've been spending hundreds of thousands of dollars anytime that they need it. That's not a plan that's necessarily going to produce, in my opinion, equity. It's something that I would do away with if my colleague wasn't so strongly. That it's her work, but
Councilor
Galvin. Yeah. But I think that, so New Hill isn't doing anything different than other people have done for years.
Why did New Hill get more attention than others?
What do you mean attention in terms of?
Press coverage. It's a conversation piece. It's being talked about constantly.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I wasn't in the rooms for those. And I know Councilor Galvin was on the show. That was definitely a question for her. She was in the room, with them. Councilor Bellamy, I wasn't in the room, so I'm sure there's more information. I just am not the person who has the more information.
Did it concern you that Dr. Bellamy was one of the founders of the organization, and then also voting whether or not the money was going to be allocated?
So it was concerning that I was concerned about how both Councilor Galvin and Councilor Bellamy handled the conversations that they apparently, the information that they have obtained way before we were brought to the table, and that it wasn't shared with us.
Because you feel the transparency wasn't there, and that's what you're all about.
When I am voting on something, I would just like to have more information.
That's fair.
And if you know and have watched Counselor Galvin, she really doesn't do anything without asking tons and tons of questions. So the fact that she wasn't asking questions had me a little concerned about whether...
Because you felt like she already knew what was going on.
Not just knew what was going on, but whether she would potentially manipulate even their long-term plans. And maybe I shouldn't say manipulate. I'm getting in trouble for that one. But that's okay. I get in trouble all the time. But, it was
Steer
concerning why she was, and if there was some way for her to take control of it.
What's it like?
And so I just hope that that's not the case, because I think the activity knowledge that Yolanda and Quentin have built in this community, that they could, help us solve this crisis in terms of, having people, one, displaced out of the community. And also, one of their goals is, when we're talking about having, Black teachers, Black doctors, Black attorneys, just Black professionals in the area, that's one of their goals. So if we're talking about, having people come to Charlottesville to help us rebrand in a very positive way, if that's one of the goals of New Hill, and also this financial piece, which we know is critical for people to have, that whole fiscal, fiscal agency, positive fiscal agency in their lives. If they can help with that, I think it'll be a good thing.
What's it like working with your fellow counselors? I mean, there's put it in perspective.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
Because not everyone has the same viewpoints. Not everyone agrees. Gets along.
No, I mean, it's definitely a challenge.
You're strong. You're strong with your opinion. You're strong with your thoughts. Mm-hmm. That's fair.
Fair.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, how does that strength, which is one of your biggest strengths, how does that interact with the folks that maybe are not as strong as you?
I don't even think it's, I'm not going to let you start there.
Okay.
We have to go back to the fact that you're talking about someone that was completely ignored. I mean, people laughed off the fact that I would even end up, on council. And it was probably election night for a lot of people before they were even paying attention. Like, she's winning. And it probably took a couple precincts for them to say, oh, we need to pay attention, to her. So you have someone who is Black, female, and, temporarily economically challenged, right? That's not the person most people want to pay attention to.
Why?
Huh?
Why?
Because, it's just been historical. Like, Malcolm X had a quote about the most unprotected, I think it was the most unprotected person in America is the Black woman, right? And we can go back to that conversation we were having about Chip Harding, or we can have the conversation about me, with Chief Brackney, and about me right now. There were people who didn't see me the entire campaign. You see me, but you didn't see me. And it caught them off guard. They should have been paying attention. I don't know why it's that difficult to understand when you should be paying attention. So I think that's the first. We're in a community where you've been able to disregard people unless you wanted them for a pet project or something like that. And
motivation or personal agenda.
I've never been one selected for pet projects, but so that right there starts off the conversation in a very negative light. And there are people, we have to work together, but people have a hard time having conversations about, like, I just don't like you as a person and I wouldn't choose to work with you. Now, I can say that to you and still work with you. Right.
Because you're a professional.
and some people have, like, I wouldn't choose you to spend time with you every day, but I will do this work. And one of the counselors said to me, why would you think that, we could bounce back like that, or, just can't overlook that this thing happened. And so, I think that's I would say that's the major challenge. I can say, you know, this isn't the best use of my time, but here, I'm forced to spend it with you.
Here you go. I'll wind it down with this, and I appreciate your time. I know how valuable it is. West Main Streetscape project. A lot of questions on that.
Yeah.
$4 million.
I think the total project is 30.
Well, from the city.
30 million.
Yeah. West Main Street, why is it so valuable? Why is it worth? Why should so much funds be allocated to that?
I don't think it should. I mean, at this point in time where we are, there are definitely more places for those resources to go to. But at the same time, it's not something that I fought because there had been, you know, a lot of work put in it. There are some state fundings. If things, you know, are better as a result of the plan, then hey, you know, it wasn't a battle that I fought with.
How often do you have to pick the battles you want to go?
I usually fight every one of them, but that's pretty exhausting. So
I bet it is.
So this is new for me, trying to decide. What I did with, you know, West Main Street was looked at the amount of time that was dedicated, the state funding that UVA needs to contribute more, but that UVA was contributing some, you know, some funding, and you know, the city match, and you know, over time. And if we are talking about the city that, you know, branding the city in the way, I just want everybody to be able to utilize Main Street, walk up and down the street, and, you know, feel welcomed. You know, I brought up the statue. People were a little bit
Lewis and Clark statue.
Yes, upset.
You caught some flack for that.
Yeah, all the time.
Right. And you want to change it because it's not indicative of what Sacagawea actually was to Lewis and Clark.
Yeah, and it's clear, you know. But again, I posted on Facebook at the time. You can go back. I think it was a 2009 article in The Hook, where the descendants, Sacagawea's descendants, felt the same way. So this is not just Nakaya, you know, seeing it. You don't see strength when you're looking at that statue. You don't see the person who was leading. You know, you don't see it. So there's a way to like truly honor someone and move away from this, you know, white male patriarchal supremacist point of view that we usually painted things.
So putting
in.
her on the platform and pedestal she certainly deserves for what she did for Lewis and Clark.
Yes.
Because in the statue, and some people say she's not cowering, she's actually reading the trail.
That's
but it looks like, from my perspective, that
like
she's
it.
cowering.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see her looking at the trail and seeing footprints.
Yeah, no.
And no one who's going 25 miles an hour by the statue will say, oh, she's looking at the trail.
They're not. And so you have an opportunity to honor Native families, if that's what you decide to do. There are some beautiful statues across the country with people who know how to do that right, and we should do it. And I brought it up because the statue is going to be moved, right, based on the plan of the streetscape.
West Main Streetscape.
So
here's our opportunity, is what you're saying.
Here's our opportunity.
Well said. We're going to wind down the interview. I'm very grateful for your time.
All right.
Last question.
One more.
Last question. Thank you, Mayor Walker. Charlottesville, Virginia, 2019. Mm-hmm. You are a lifetime resident of Charlottesville.
Yes.
2019, better place, worse place than when you were growing up in the community?
Ask me on December 31st.
Why December 31st?
Because today I'm going to have the same, I want to have a positive comment.
Yeah? You think it's better?
I don't.
No? You think it's worse than when you were growing up?
I do. I think it has been bad for a long time.
Well, and you're one of the leaders that I think is going to make it better.
Yeah, hopefully. I'm working on it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. I'm truly grateful for your time.
Thank you for having me.
I know how busy she is. She was a woman of her word. She came here. She gave us time.
You should have told them that story.
And I can't tell. Should I tell them that story?
No.
She crushed it.
If you want
today.
to, but
she crushed it today, and I think all of us have gained more respect for her. I'm truly grateful. Tomorrow we have Liza Borges. She is an automotive powerhouse. She's going to join us on the I Love Seaville show Friday. Mark Lorenzoni of Ragged Mountain Running Shop. I'm truly grateful for your time, and we close the show the same way. Charlottesville, please be good to each other. We'll see you tomorrow at 12:30.